Hi, everybody. I hope you had a full rest from the first session, and now we will start the second session. This is Ji Young Park, who has a responsibility for this session. I'm an associate professor at the State University of New York and adjunct associate professor at the Seoul National University. Also, it is a really great time we can introduce a new session time together. So on the floor and participants for this session, please use either Korean or English when you speak. In the case, we can use this translator, so that is a great thing for us to do. From now on, we'll move to session 2. The main topic of this session is major countries' agenda for carbon neutrality. Under the session scope, best practices and strategies with experts from Korea, Germany, Colombia, and Vietnam will join. Here, this session could be proceeded as a hybrid type presentations. So first, 2 presentations will be presented via pre-recorded videos, and the last 2 will present in person. First, I'm really happy to introduce Ms. Dong-Kyu Lee, who is the Director General for Climate Change, Energy, Environment, and Scientific Affairs, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for his keynote speech. He'll present diplomas of science and technology in response to climate change in Korea. While Mr. Lee will join with a pre-recorded video, please welcome him for his keynote speech with big claps.
안녕하십니까. 외교부의 이동규 기후환경과학국장입니다. 현장에서 여러분들과 함께 참석하지 못하는 것을 유감스럽게 생각합니다. 오늘 컨퍼런스를 통해서 여러분들을 만나고 여러분들의 의견을 들을 수 있었으면 좋았을 텐데 그렇게 못하지만 이렇게 비디오라도 같이 참석하게 된 것을 영광으로 생각합니다. 미국의 유전학자인 에릭 랜더 교수가 미 대통령 과학보좌관 겸 백악관 과학기술정책실장으로 상원 인준을 받으면서 바이든 행정부는 Science is back 이라고 천명하였습니다. 이 슬로건은 과학적 무결성과 증거 기반 정책 수립을 통한 정부 정책에 대한 신뢰 회복을 목적으로 하지만 우리가 직면하고 있는 기후위기의 대응과 경제 패러다임의 전환에 있어서 과학기술의 중요성을 상징적으로 보여준다고 생각합니다. 기후환경과학 분야에서 오랫동안 외교 업무를 담당해왔지만 지금처럼 과학기술 분야가 국제관계의 핵심 현안으로 부상한 적은 없습니다. 미국, 중국 등 강대국들은 과학기술 영역에서 패권을 다투고 전통적 지정학과 과학기술의 연계와 결합이 심화되고 있습니다. 산업혁명, 전기혁명 등 인류 역사에 있어서 과학기술이 중요하지 않았던 적은 없었습니다. mRNA 백신, 5G, 6G, 퀀텀 컴퓨팅과 통신, AI 등 혁신적인 과학기술이 국가안보는 물론 우리들의 일상생활에 이렇게 즉각적이고 큰 충격과 변화를 가져오고 있는 것은 처음인 것 같습니다. 기후위기를 대응하는 기후행동에 있어서도 배터리 기술, 수소 등 새로운 에너지, CCUS는 물론 우주 인공위성을 통한 기상 예측, 드론을 이용한 재난 대응 등 4차 산업 기술이나 신흥기술은 국가 기업의 경쟁력 이상의 생존 문제와도 긴밀하게 연관되고 있습니다. 지난 5월 한미 정상회담에서 양국 정상은 첨단 반도체, 친환경 전기차용 배터리, AI, 양자기술, 바이오기술, 자율 로봇을 포함한 핵심 신흥기술을 보호하고 진흥하기 위한 민간 협력을 강화하기로 협의했습니다. 한미 동맹이 안보 동맹을 넘어 기후변화 대응과 과학기술의 혁신을 함께 추구하는 포괄적인 파트너십으로 확대 발전하고 있는 것입니다. 저는 기후변화 대응, 특히 2050 탄소 중립을 실현하기 위해서는 과학기술의 혁신적인 진보가 꼭 필요하다는 전문가들의 말을 많이 듣고 있습니다. 기후변화 대응을 위한 파리 협정의 중요한 요소 중 하나가 제10조 기술개발과 이전입니다. 작년 글래스고 COP26에서 전 세계의 90%의 GDP를 차지하는 국가들이 금세기 중엽까지 탄소 중립을 달성하기로 약속했습니다. 탄소 중립을 실질적으로 이행하기 위해 주요국들을 중심으로 글로벌 메탄 서약, 무배출 차량 이니셔티브, 청정 에너지 기술 이니셔티브 등 탄소 감축을 위한 적극적인 노력이 추진되고 있습니다. 이 모든 기후 행동의 핵심은 과학기술 혁신이며 과학기술은 우리가 약속한 2030 국가 감축 목표와 탄소 중립을 달성하기 위한 해결책입니다. 오늘 이 자리에 참석하신 전문가분들이 그 해결책을 만들어가는 주인공이라고 믿습니다. 지금은 주식시장이 어려운 상황이지만 미국이든 우리나라든 주식시장을 선도하고 있는 것은 소위 기술주라고 불리우는 전기자동차, 반도체, 스마트폰, 플랫폼 기업들입니다. 즉 과학기술의 혁신은 기후변화 대응과 녹색 전환을 선도하면서 우리 경제의 성장을 촉진하는 역할을 하고 있는 것입니다. 녹색 에너지 전환과 녹색 경제로의 전환은 기후변화 대응뿐만 아니라 한국 경제가 한층 더 높은 단계로 발전하기 위한 기회입니다. 귀빈 여러분, 외교부는 이러한 시대적 변화와 과학기술의 외교안보적 함의를 잘 이해하고 있습니다. 과학기술과 지정학이 통합되는 기술 패권의 시대에서 외교부가 해야 될 일을 열심히 찾아보고 있고 조직을 정비하기 위해서도 노력하고 있습니다. 작년부터 과학기술자문위원회 설립, 과학기술협력대사 임명, 과학기술 거점 공간 재편과 과기전문관제도 신설 등 과학기술 외교 개선을 위한 역량 강화에 힘써왔습니다. 앞에서 말씀드린 것처럼 과학기술의 변화가 즉각적이고 직접적으로 우리 경제안보와 국민의 삶에 영향을 미치는 이러한 시대에는 전통적인 사고방식과 조직 제도는 한계가 있다고 생각합니다. 정부 조직, 민간 전문가, 기업, 그리고 국내와 국외가 융복합적으로 소통하고 협력해야 한다고 생각합니다. 오늘 컨퍼런스는 탄소 중립을 위한 과학기술 외교의 방향성을 설정하는 데 큰 도움이 될 것입니다. 근본 회의를 통해 혁신적이고 의미 있는 논의가 많이 이루어지기를 기대합니다. 감사합니다.
Thanks, Mr. Lee. Now I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Camilla Oliveira, a project manager at Agora Energiewende, located in Germany. Her work focuses on the decarbonization of industrial sectors in the European Union and Brazil. Her topic to present today is the strategic plan of Germany toward a carbon neutral. And please enjoy her pre-recorded presentation video too.
Good afternoon. I'm Camila Oliveira. I'm project manager industry at Agora Energiewende. I'm based in Berlin, Germany. I'm very happy to be here in this conference today. Thank you for the invitation. I would like to give you a quick overview of the European industrial transformation and how we as Agora are working to foster this transformation. First, I would like to show you who we are and what we do. So we are a think tank and policy lab. We are around 100 energy transition experts. We are an independent organization and we receive funding from philanthropy. Our mission is to serve the climate and our vision is to foster a carbon neutral global economy. We provide solutions and policy recommendations based on science to deliver clean power, heat, and industrial goods in Germany, Europe, and around the globe. We have offices in Berlin, where I'm based, in Brussels, in Beijing, and in Bangkok. Apart from this, Agora is coordinating the international network of energy transition think tanks. We have partners of energy transition all over the world. We also have a partner in Korea, GESI. And the objective of this network is to advance international cooperation and to share knowledge and experience to advance energy transition around the globe. So let's jump into the content. Why industry is so important for our climate ambitions? Because industry accounts for 44% of the global CO2 emissions if we take into account the electricity and heat requirements. And 5 basic industries are responsible for 20% of global CO2 emissions, which are the steel sector, cement, chemicals, aluminum, and paper alone. And when we see the emissions, the trends in emissions since 1990, the CO2 emissions from industries have grown the most in absolute terms. And if we don't do anything now in these decades, these emissions from industry will still continue to increase because there will be an increase in the demand for basic materials around the globe. When we see the European industry, the steel, the cements and chemicals are the largest emitters, account for 60% of the European industry emissions. Part of these emissions, 67%, are related to energy, for example, combustions for burning fossil fuels, and 33% are related to process, which entails chemical and physical transformations that others than combustions of fossil fuels. So Agora, we have been focused majority in the steel, cement, and chemical sectors, and this is the sectors that I would like to give you an overview today. As a policy background, Europe is implementing the European Green Deal, which aims to be climate neutral by 2050, the European Union. But Germany has a target to be climate neutral by 2035. Also, the European Green Deal says that by 2030, the emissions of the bloc should be reduced by 55% when compared to 1990. So there are a lot of EU policy files, legislations that are on the desk to help to meet this target. For example, the reform of the European emissions trading systems, the clean hydrogen strategy, the circular economy action plan, legislation on renewable energy and energy efficiency. If you want to achieve the targets of climate neutrality by 2050, this is only one investment cycle away. This means that all the technologies that we have now in our industry needs to be aligned with the climate neutrality by 2050. It needs to be, we need to retrofit or to implement green technologies for our basic material industry. This is because blast furnaces, for example, in the steel industry, or steam crackers in the chemical industry, or cement kilns, they have a very long lifetime. So any relining or modernization that we do in this decade needs to be aligned in climate neutrality. There is not a silver bullet for all the technologies and all the sectors. So we have different strategies that will help us to meet these targets of climate neutrality, and we cluster them into 3 different strategies. The first strategy is direct electrification and indirect electrification. Direct electrification, for example, to substitute combining heat and power or fossil fuel boilers through power to heat using heat pumps or electric boilers. We can also have indirect electrification through the use of green hydrogen produced from water electrolysis. The no-regrets green hydrogen uses in Europe entails the use of hydrogen as a feedstock, not as an energy vector to combust. For example, we want to use the hydrogen in the steel sector for direct reduction iron, and also in the chemical sector for the production of green methanol, green ammonia, and also chemical recycling of plastics. The second strategy is the circular economy, which is also transversal to all the industrial sectors. So we need circular economy, material efficiency, energy efficiency, and also material substitution to rethink what kind of material should we use that has a lower life cycle emissions. The third strategy is closing the carbon cycle, which entails the carbon capture and storage and use, and also the use of biomass. And if biomass is combined with CCS, it can generate negative emissions, which will be needed to achieve climate neutrality by 2050. Now, let's take a look on the steel sector. The steel sector is the largest emitter of the industrial sector. This map shows where the steel plants are located in Europe. 60% of the steel capacity is based on coal, the coal-based blast furnace route, which is the conventional steel-making route, and 40% in secondary steel route, which is electric arc furnace. So what is the challenge? To replace this primary steel-making capacity, which is the coal-based blast furnace, into low-carbon technologies that will be compatible with the climate neutrality by 2050. So we envision three types of technologies. The first one, direct reduction iron, which will use natural gas in the beginning, the transition phase, and then when we have enough green hydrogen, we can use green hydrogen as an agent to produce green steel. And also we need to expand electric arc furnace that we already have. 40% is based on electric arc furnaces. But we need to increase the steel scrap supply and also the quality of the steel scrap. And this graph shows the announced primary low-carbon steel-making capacity by 2030 in Europe. So we have already 28 megatons of low-carbon steel-making capacity by 2030. This is unfortunately not in all the European countries. It is mostly concentrated in Sweden, Germany, the Netherlands, France, Romania, and Austria. Now, looking into the cement sector, cement sector is the second largest emitter, and we have the 50% are process emissions related to the clinker production. And then it's very difficult to abate these emissions. And then by 2030, we envision that the technology that should be deployed is CCS, because carbon capture and storage can capture the CO2 not only from the fuel emissions, but also from the process emissions. And if we combine CCS with use and biomass as a fuel in the cement sector, we can generate negative emissions. This graph shows the map of Europe and where the plants of cement are located. And also the blue circle shows the potential offshore CO2 storage. So we can see that cement plants that are located in the northern and in the southern Europe are already eligible to deploy CCS, since it's close to offshore CO2 storage in the North Sea or in the Mediterranean, for example. So the three technologies that we envision for the cement sector is CCS with oxy-fuel process, also CCS with electrification of calciners, and we use less fuels. This is called sleigh-like process. It's already a pilot project in Europe that is working with this kind of low carbon technology, and also alternative binding agents, which will use less clinker in the cement. Now jumping into chemicals. This map shows where the steam crackers to produce high-value chemicals and also ammonia plants are located in Europe. The chemical industry is the third largest emitter in industrial sector, but it's the largest energy user of the industrial sector. And why is not also the third energy user? Because 58% of the fossil fuels that enters the chemical sector is used as a feedstock. So it does not undergo under combustion. We cannot say that the chemical sector can be decarbonized, because the chemical sector, even in a climate neutral world, we always need carbon in its product. So the challenge is we're gonna need carbon, but we need a renewable carbon. We don't want to use fossil fuels anymore because we need to abate emissions. And the largest source of emissions in the chemical industry is industrial power plants, steam crackers, and gray hydrogen production for ammonia. This graph shows the linear value chain of plastics, which is one of the chemical products of the chemical industry. And we can see that the value chain is very fragmented and very linear, unfortunately. So we use carbon. In Europe, we use mostly oil and naphtha. In other countries, for example, in the US, they use natural gas as a feedstock. So we use carbon, and then we use the carbon in the refineries, we'll retain the naphtha, and then we use as an energy and feedstock in the chemical industry. And then we produce the final products we use, and then we have the plastic waste. And then most of the plastic waste in Europe is being incinerated, releasing back the CO2 that it was entailed in the product back to the atmosphere. So to halt climate change, the chemical industry must shift from a linear fossil to a resource-efficient circular economy. So we have three cornerstones to address the transformation of the chemical industry in Europe. The first one is the circular economy to reduce downstream emissions. The circular economy means that when plastics are not needed, they should be reduced. When plastics make sense, we need to design them that they can be reused all the time to demand less energy and material. And when reusing is not possible, the plastic should return to its cycle through mechanical recycling, which is the conventional recycling. But for that, we need to improve collection and sorting of plastic waste. And when the plastic cannot be mechanically recycled, there is the chemical recycling technologies, which there's a lot of types of technologies. And there's some pilot plants already in Europe working with chemical recycling, for example, pyrolysis and gasification. Actually, there's already commercial plants working with the pyrolysis of plastic waste. And the most important thing is to design for to reuse and also for recyclability. The second cornerstone is direct electrification, using power to heat and also electrifying the steam cracker. So we need to combine the circular economy with electrification to use less and less fossil fuels in the industry. And the third one is to use biogenic carbon from forests, from sustainable biomass. Because even if we do circular economy, of course, there are losses in the process. So there will always have a need to use some virgin carbon, but this virgin carbon has to come from biogenic carbon, from sustainable management forest. That's it. Thank you. I have my email here. If you have any comments and discussions, I would be happy to answer. Thank you a lot.
Thank you, Camelia. Wow, we could clearly understand what Germany's strategic plan for a carbon zero society across various industrial sectors. What I was especially impressed is to emphasize a circular economy and CCS to maintain or boost our economic activities that we are also highlighting in Korea. We've learned how industrial decarbonization in EU is currently going on and being contributed by Agora, especially about the policy. Thanks again, Camelia. Now, I introduce in-person presentations. The first presenter as in-person presentation speaker is Mr. Juan Sebastian Gomez from the Embassy of Colombia in Korea. He will present 2023 P4G Cooperation Plan of Colombia. Please welcome him with your big claps for this presentation.
Well, firstly, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a great honor to be here with you. I'm Juan Sebastian Gomez, Second Secretary at the Embassy of Colombia in Korea. Joe, the title of the presentation in the agenda is the Cooperation Plan for P4G next year. I will take the advantage of this presentation to introduce you somehow my country and our 2050 decarbonization policy, and then I will finish with a few information about the P4G summit next year. So as I understand, our distance between Colombia and Korea is great, not only geographical but also cultural, so I would like to begin with a short presentation about my country. So just for your understanding and your imagination, Colombia is 11 times bigger than South Korea. We have the same amount of population. Most of our population is urban, and we have a strong population also in the rural side of our country, and our economy is getting concentrated in services area, though agriculture is getting more attention in these days, and I will finish with that part, and I will come back to that. This is also important because agricultural sector in our country marks how our vulnerability against climate change is defined, and our social and economical structure will be affected due to climate change. So Colombia is one of the most biodiverse countries per square kilometer in the world, as we host 70% of world's biodiversity in only 10% of our territory. If you take that into consideration, you can see that this is one of the greatest assets that we have in our country. But at the same time, this is only of the part that we know in our country. Due to the armed conflict that we had, certain part of our territory is not yet explored, so it's possible that these numbers are higher. Also, we have more than 300 types of ecosystems, and our territory is more than half of our territory is covered by forest. So this gives us like a glance of what we are talking about in Colombia, and the great responsibility that we have to take into consideration when we are talking about vulnerabilities to climate change, but also responsibilities to restore, to protect, and to conserve in a fair way, but also to promote like sustainable use of our natural resources. I want to share with you these maps that were presented to UNFCCC, the United Nations Convention on Climate Change. These were presented in our third communication to the convention, and show you a study that were made in Colombia regarding our vulnerability in 3 scenarios. The 3 scenarios is business as usual, moderate action, and 1.5 pathways. So as you can see, these first maps are regarding the rain patterns that we are expecting that we are going to have, and so is this working? No, it's not working. Oh yeah. Well, in the left corner that is the vulnerability projection that we're going to have up to 2070, which few years ago seems really far away, but right now it's only 30 years from now. So we are expecting a change in precipitations, and a strong change of precipitations in the north side of our country and in the middle, which are the high mountains. So we suffer a lot from floods and droughts, as you can see also in the right corner, which is business as usual scenarios. So the variability of the vulnerability is great in proportion. So if we do a lot, we are going to have one scenario. If we do nothing, the change is going to be great. This represents the changes in the temperatures. Again, the right corner and the bottom right corner is the map at the business as usual. So you can see in only 30 or 40 years, if we do nothing worldwide, our country will have a variability of almost 3.2 to 3.6 grades in the temperature. And since we have a lot of ecosystems, different ecosystems that are really fragile, this means a great vulnerability for our country. Taking into account that we only meet 0.6 of global gas greenhouse emissions, which I learned today is half of Korea's percentage, we are particularly vulnerable to these climate change effects. And I like to share, we can classify this vulnerability in three main characteristics. One is due to the diversity of our country. The ecosystems are really fragile, and our flora and fauna is really fragile to the change in the temperatures. Also because the geographical position of our country is in the equatorial line of the world, and this part of the world, which also wears Vietnam, is highly exposed to natural hazards in different ways that north side and southern sides of the world are located. And also, as at the beginning, our social and economic structures are heavily dependent in our natural resources. So we have a strong dependence on agriculture, for instance, which will be directly affected to climate change. Taking into account that recently Colombia, I would like to share this in a broad way, are a few initiatives that Colombia has been undertaking in the recent years. So during COP26, we launched our long-term strategy to 2050. I will come back to this. We also present our green taxonomy policy in April next year. This is for giving a guidance on green investments and how to promote the redirection of investments to sustainable pathways in our country. As we saw earlier, the European Union also have this green taxonomy, so we are trying to create this system of classification of green investments. During COP26, we also engage and put on the table our compromise to expand our marine and land protected areas. We take the pledge to make triple size of our protected size in our country. So by 2030, we are expecting to have upon 30% of our territory protected. And we saw already that half of our country is forest. So this means that a great proportion of our country will be under conservation policies. The climate action law, this is one thing I would like to highlight, because this is a law that took our commitment of our NDC into Congress and make it now a law. So our commitment to UNFCCC and our reduction commitments are enforceable by law in our country. So this gives us only a great tools to keep doing it in our country. And the two last initiatives are our hydrogen roadmap and an offshore wind farms roadmap that will set the path and will set the normative framework and incentives to develop these two areas in our country. We have already done pilots on hydrogen, successful pilots of hydrogen in our country with green hydrogen recently in the recent months, and the offshore wind farms roadmap just got launched like 2 months ago, so we'll set the path to develop these two industries in our country. So now talking about long-term strategy, just want to make a quick briefing about it. This was an initiative done in a broad and an inclusive participatory way, with the strong approach to include local communities and minority groups in our country. Due to our diversity, which is not only based in natural resources, is also in cultural and territorial diversity. There's a must in Colombia that we have to do it in a really inclusive, in a local approach way to do that. So the long-term strategy was made through national-wide workshops with different types of population workshops, also in thematical coordinations, and it also have a great strategy of diffusion of information with the with the civil society, including universities and NGOs working in the territorial level of our country. The long-term strategy was based also taking into account previous planning activities that were made in the country as the NDC for the UNFCCC. It also was built taking into account our energy plan to 2050, which aims to transform our energy matrix to 2050, which is today kind of decent. We almost 70% of our energy matrix comes from hydro sources, so it's quite good. But the other 30% has a strong attachment to extractive industries and oil industries. It was also based on formulated upon 2 studies that were made in Colombia, and scenario studies for decarbonization, where also for the third communication, it was projecting the country in different stages of changes of temperature. So it was giving the policy, the roadmaps in the different scenarios. And also taking into account the neutrality, this policy took into consideration the needs to enhance the absorption of greenhouse mechanisms, both through technology implementation and enforcements, and also through improvement of the AFOLU sector of our country, AFOLU agricultural and forestry sectors. And all the strategy was made within this approach, socio-ecological resilience, which is the understanding that there is an indivisible relationship between the nature and the human culture. So only through understanding these strong linkages between the nature and the human culture, the policymaker can come up with a holistic and systemic solutions to that from a local approach to it. Since we have so many different ecosystems, and in those ecosystems, the relations between the communities and the nature resources vary so much, there is a need to do it in this really comprehensive way. Principles this policy have right now, I won't read them, but you can see from here that it is a really comprehensive approach to understand our country and to understand how we are going to set out the path of our development towards this goal. And when I was reading the policy, each one of those principles has a development and has a strong basis on how they are going to produce and how they are going to engage in achieving the goal. So it's formidable to see the exercise of this. The policy is planned for 3 main stages. The first one for ambition scale up from 2020 to 2030. And it also comprehends the actual NDCs and the current plans that I talked to you before. The second stage is the multidimensional transformation from 2030 to 2040, based on the updated NDC that Colombia will have to present to the UNFCCC by 2030, and the achievement of the SDGs by 2030. And the third phase, the consolidation of climate resilient future up to 2050, taking into account the third NDC that Colombia will have to present to that. The paths that the policy have set, the paths, they call it the bets that the country is going to enforce and is going to prioritize. So I won't read it for the sake of time, but you can see here that it's a really comprehensive policy taking almost all the sectors that are somehow related to climate change and to energy transition, and to set the country in a path towards carbon neutral path. So for until here, this is the policy of carbon neutrality of Colombia. There's more to that. There's financial mechanisms. There's understanding of how the financial instruments that we have in Colombia are projected to comply with this, and the needs also for cooperation to achieve actually this. But I won't get to that. And finally, regarding the P4G summit next year, currently the country is working on understanding how to better cope with this opportunity of hosting this summit next year. So we are trying to identify how to better linkage it with different scenarios that is going to happen next year and different processes that are going to happen next year. The main process next year is going to be the SDGs midterm evaluation period is going to be hosted at the UN General Assembly. So we are expecting to somehow connect those processes in a way that we can scale up the action towards the achievement of the SDGs and the 2030 agenda. We also are trying to identify the path on how this opportunity of hosting the P4G summit is going to help us to scale up also the domestic ambition through the engagement of the private sector in our country and the different actors in our country. And we took example of Korea, how Korea actually did it, and so we are somehow following the role of Korea on how you were able to connect with the different chaebols, universities, and how to create this network of work. And taking that into consideration, we also have an intersectoral technical working group, as it happened here, including already the private sector. The central theme is yet to be decided. It's going to be chosen between green growth, biodiversity, sustainable cities, although our Ministry of Environment last year said it was going to be deforestation, so it's yet to be defined. Venue also yet to be defined. The options are the main cities of Colombia, and the date probably October, taking into consideration the UN calendar. I want just to finish with recent news of our country. This process is just like a brief understanding, because we were in a huge uncertainty in our country due to our presidential elections. Our current elected president, in his initial speech as elected president, he set the path of our foreign policy, naming that Colombia will have to take a leading role in climate change and environmental policies worldwide. So this is a huge impulse for what is going to come up next. It's great news. So we are only expecting the better and the greatest possibilities to enhance cooperation, to open the spaces to cooperation with different actors, and of course with different institutions from Korea. So that's the finish of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Juan. We could understand why, how, and what direction Colombia is currently having for carbon neutrality strategies. Also, it is great and how wonderful to host the P4G summit in Colombia next year. So, without coronavirus, definitely let's meet there all together. Where I also would like to involve and contribute to this important topic case with you. All right, now we are waiting for the final presentation because we spent a lot of time already. So I hope we can a little bit move fast for this case to have a discussion time. So this presentation is also in-person attendance. So I welcome Ms. Ngoc Do from the Embassy of the Vietnam in Korea. She will present Vietnam's climate policy and climate technology cooperation. Sorry, please give your great hands for her presentation.
Ladies and gentlemen, this year is an important year in relation with diplomatic relation between Vietnam and Korea. It's a mark 30th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between two countries. Firstly, on these occasions in my presentation, I would like to present some minutes about the science and technology cooperation between Vietnam and Korea. Vietnam and Korea signed an agreement on scientific and technology cooperation in 1995. We still established a joint committee to discuss about the science and technology cooperation and joint research projects. In the period of 2021 to 2024, we choose 4 fields: is the information technology, biotechnology, environmental technology, and nanotechnology for the Vietnam-Korea Joint Research Program. This shows that Vietnam puts the climate change and environmental protection as the key issue to focus on solving. As you know, Vietnam is facing an alarming rate environmental damage and resources depletion contributed by climate change. Vietnam is considered one of the countries most badly affected by climate change in the world, with its a long coastline and susceptibility to natural disaster. Vietnam's economic and social development is being threatened by climate change. In the process of resource cooperation, we have received the grants and support from Korea. Through the COCA, we received a lot of projects about the expert support, training, experience in exchange, and especially we learned from successful Korean model. Vietnam-Korea Institute in Science and Technology is the most prominent symbol in Vietnam-Korea science and technology cooperation. Korea has supported Vietnam to establish the Vietnam-Korea Institute of Science and Technology based on the success model of KISS. We hope that VKISS will help Vietnam in training high-class human resources, enhancing scientific and technical research capacity, meeting the need of industrialization and modernization of the country. with the success of Phase 1 VKIS project, Vietnam and Korea is preparing for Phase 2 project and is a institute development plan with the research content on climate change. Secondly, I would like present about using the clean technology in Vietnam. From the 2012, Vietnamese government has approved the strategy of using clean technology for the period 2020 with a vision to 2030 with the viewpoint to use clean technology on basis of choosing technology which is consistent with the current technology situation of the country, development trends of the region and the world. To encourage the organization and individual to research, apply, transfer, and use clean technology in production, business, and life. Vietnam also sets specific goals such as improving the system legal documents, technical standards, regulation on clean technology, gradually implementing technological innovation towards using clean technology in the whole industry. By 2030, 100% of the production units in the whole industry to adopt technical standard regulation on clean technology. Vietnam considers EU clean technology as a part of its national strategy for environmental protection because 90% of enterprises in Vietnam are small and medium enterprise, and a large amount of current production equipment and production facility use the popular technology of the 80s, 90s, and even the 70s of the last century. In 2013, Vietnam built the framework of the technology needs assessment projects for climate change adaptations were assessed for agriculture, forestry, coastal zone management, and water resources management. Because they are predicted to be adversely impacted by climate change in future, selected technology vary from the convention to model technologies that are feasible in Vietnam. However, the application of clean technology has not met the set targets. In a survey on clean technology application was shown that in the period 2012-2020, the number of enterprises innovating technology and equipment in the direction using clean technology is still limited, not reaching the target in Vietnam's strategy on using clean technology until 2020. The cause of this situation is that Vietnamese enterprise lack strategic vision, capital, and information. Therefore, in the next period, we have to try harder to improve the situation. And the Vietnamese government have to effort in promoting use of clean technology in the industry. Vietnam is considered one of country most affected by climate over the past year. Under the impacts of climate change, the frequency and intensity of natural disasters and increasing cost of huge loss in human life, property, infrastructure, economy, society, and lead to bad influence on environment. Climate change impacts on Vietnam are serious and induce threat to the cause of poverty reduction, the realization of Millennium Goals, and the country's sustainable development. Vietnam has made a great strides in responding to climate change, reflecting through nation policy and program. As Vietnam's commitment as the 26th UN Climate Change Conference as a party, COP26, so that the government is serious about climate change and energy resources. Vietnam since established the National Steering Committee for the implementation of Vietnam's commitment. Vietnam briefing follows the progress of Vietnam commitment of net zero COP26, including 8 areas that Vietnam had to focus on. About improving policy mechanism, Vietnamese government has just approved the policies such as the National Strategy for Environmental Protection to 2030 with the vision until 2050, National Green Growth Strategy for 2020-2030 with the vision until 2050, the Scheme for Circular Economy Development in Vietnam, to complete and upgrade the national strategy on climate change, including net zero emission and reducing emission of methane gas. At the same time, the government of Vietnam also creates the necessary conditions to promote technological innovation and application of clean technology industry. The Vietnamese government targets to mitigate the impact pollution, solve the urgent environmental problem, and gradually improve and restore the quality of the environment, which goal Vietnam really needs cooperation with other countries in general and Korea in particular, so that we can step by step achieve the set goal. Lastly, we would like to propose a cooperation program in the field in climate change technology in the next period. That is the Vietnam-Korean co-funding program for applied research, experimental development of climate technology. Through the program, two countries enjoy research issues of mutual concern. We hope to receive the strong from you. Yeah, I stop my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Navdoti. Another great time we could have to understand the SNT cooperation between Vietnam and Korea, and also learn clean tech market in Vietnam. Thanks a lot. So I sincerely appreciate the four presenters for their precious time and effort for the presentations. Reaching carbon neutral society is not easy at all. Even any of us has never experienced this type of a climate risk, considering our Earth history. Our worries about carbon emissions already reached the unbearable level. So at this moment, we could accommodate four important topics. What is the Korea's SNT diplomacy responding to the climate change? What is the industry level decarbonizations for EU, especially Germany? And what will be the next agenda for P4G prepared by Colombia to be held next year? And what will be the Vietnamese climate policy and climate tech cooperation direction? So each country has a different settings while climate change is a global issue. So different settings, different topics should be fully engaged by other experts who could have opportunities to read and or watch those presentations. So I'm really delighted to introduce four presenters together here with the additional two presenters from Colombia and Vietnam. So the four discussants is the Mr. Hyung-Sun Kim, Director of Kim Ventures, and also Mr. Jae-Ryung Song, Senior Researcher, ASIP, and also Dr. Jung-Ah Hwang, Researcher from GTC, and also Dr. Yong-Kyu Lee, Principal Researcher from KIMM. So from now on, please have a free time for discussion on this important topic we had today. While the discussion point can be very wide, but we are limited to time to discuss. So I also wanted to focus more on the topics and points, which is the first one is about the global or international cooperation direction on climate technologies. what will be the Korea's direction and role there. Second, how to expand the climate technology cooperation, especially between developed and developing countries. So that would be also really a great, deliver great the implications on this discussion today. So I expect this discussion may take a while, previously designed 30 minutes, but please shorten the time about the 15 minutes. So each discussion just can have 3 to 5 minutes, please. And also, I would like to finish this meeting by 5:45 p.m. So if I disrupt your discussion due to the time constraint, please understand me about that instruction. So who's gonna be the first talk about those two main points? Yes, Mr. Song.
네, 안녕하십니까. 저는 아시아 기술 혁신학회 선임연구원으로 있는 송재령입니다. 반갑습니다. 오늘 뜻깊은 자리에 초청해 주셔서 대단히 감사의 말씀을 좀 드리겠습니다. 오늘 이용규 센터장님 그리고 좌장하고 계신 박지영 교수님 등 오늘 이런 뜻깊은 자리에 저희가 발언을 할 수 있게 돼서 영광이고요. 한 3가지 종류 정도 말씀을 드리겠습니다. 첫 번째는 첫 번째 저희 세션에서 혁신 주제로 이야기를 나눴었고요. 그 옆에 행사장에서 ESG에서 가장 중요한 게 좀 자꾸 환경을 말씀하시는데, 전 개인적으로 환경보다는 지배 구조가 어떻게 우리가 자연 환경이 아니라 종합적인 환경에 어떻게 영향을 미치냐, 우리 정치, 경제, 사회 그런 부분에서 지배 구조가 더 중요해 보이는데 그런 논의가 조금 부족하지 않았나. 결국에는 제가 말씀드린 대로 이 지배 구조가 어떻게 형성이 되면서 환경 문제가 엮여 들어가는지에 대한 포커스가 조금 더 깊게 다가갔다면 나중에 기계기술 R&D라든지 제조 분야에 조금 핀트를 잡을 수 있지 않을까라는 생각을 했고요. R&D 역할은 무엇이냐? 결국 제조와 산업적 기여인데, 그렇다면 산업 이펙트가 높은 연구 개발 지원이 필요하고요. 결국에는 이제 과학적 지식과 기술 개발을 좀 분리할 필요가 있다. 왜냐하면 장기적인 측면에서는 순수 과학 연구가 분명히 필요할 거고요. 하지만 지금 현재 우리가 당면한 어떤 먹고 사는 문제, 비즈니스 측면에서는 기술 개발이 필요하기 때문에 고위험 개발을 할 수 있는, 그럼 기계의 역할은 물론 기계의 역할은 응용 산업 부분이 더 강하긴 하지만 앞에 과학 지식도 물론 떼어낼 수가 없고, 그렇다면 기초과학 연구원이나 IBS라든지 혹은 그런 연구소들과의 과학 연구도 일정 부분 좀 쿼터를 가져야 되지 않을까. 근데 그런 부분이 없었기 때문에 좀 아쉽다라는 생각이 들었습니다. 잘하고 있지만 이런 부분 추가시키면 어떨까라는 생각을 또 했고요. 그리고 이제 저희 이번 세션에서 저희가 논의됐던 부분, 아까 국제협력 부분에 말씀드렸는데, 국제협력에 있어서 기후기술 협력은 기존 과학기술 협력 혹은 국제개발협력과는 다른 접근법과 방향성을 지닌다라고 생각합니다. 따라서 기후기술 협력은 방법론에서도 분석 수준과 분석 단위가 고려되어야 되고요. 그렇기 때문에 과학기술 협력은 첨단적인 지식과 개발이 우선되어야 되고 성격상 폐쇄적일 수밖에 없다. 그리고 그 국제개발협력은 보편적인 과학과 기술이 적용이 중요하며 상대적으로 상대 국가의 개방성이 크다. 그렇다면 기후기술은 보편적인 목적을 강하고 또 우리가 공공재 성격인 대기와 공기 부분을 이야기를 하고 있기 때문에 이런 공공재적인 성격에서 우리가 과학기술 기여할 수 있는 문제 해결 방식이 다르다. 그렇다면 우리가 앞으로 과학기술 협력과 국제개발협력의 이 틈에서 장점을 살릴 수 있는 기후기술 협력에 대한 지속가능한 이익을 창출할 수 있는, 그래서 수익과 이익은 또 분리되어야 되지만 그런 부분에서 고려해야 된다는 걸 말씀드리고 싶고요. 두 번째는 이제 한국은 어쨌든 간에 6.25 동란 전쟁을 겪으면서 최빈국 지위에서 선진국으로 발전한 전 세계 유일한 국가라고 생각합니다. 그렇다고 해서 우리가 자만심을 갖거나 거만하게 생각하는 게 아니라 K 블라블라 K 뷰티 이런 게 중요한 게 아니라 서로 우리가 기술을 나누고 그런 것들이 보편적 인류의 가치를 실현할 수 있게끔 과학기술 협력 방안을 제시하는 것이 무엇보다 중요하다. 그렇기 때문에 지금 인류 보편적 발전을 위해서 SDG에서 선진국으로서의 선진국들과의 어떤 R&D 협력, 그리고 기술 나눔과 이 개도국, 우리가 개도국 위치에 선진국으로 섰기 때문에 그거에 대한 어떤 갚아나가는 선진국으로서의 어떤 의무, 이런 부분도 과학기술계에서 리더십을 발휘해야 된다는 말씀을 드리고 싶고요. 끝으로 이제 사실은 전략적인 부분이 굉장히 중요합니다. 아까 두 번째 질문 박지원 교수님께서 말씀하신 대로 그럼 어떻게 확산하고 어떤 전략을 가져갈 것이냐. 그래서 기후기술 협력은 확산을 위해서는 공공 외교도 중요하다. 즉 꼭 우리가 외교가 아니라 어쨌든 저는 외교관은 아니고요. 공무원은 아니기 때문에 그러면 민간 차원에서의 협력도 가속화시켜야 되고 보편적 가치는 결국에 비즈니스가 되고 비즈니스가 되려면 응용산업화된 현지 착근형인 산업개발이 필요하다라는 부분이고 그렇기 때문에 지금 오늘 주제인 기계기술과 산업기술의 어떤 적용, 국제적 확산 그리고 그런 것들은 어떤 플랫폼에서 이뤄나가줘야 할 것이냐. R&D 부분은 어쨌든 간에 우리가 유럽과 오늘도 기사가 났지만 우리가 유레카라든지 H2020이 정식 회원이 되면서 그런 국제 공동 연구와 산업 임팩트를 키울 수 있는 유로스타 과제도 같이 기획해 보면서 나갈 수 있다는 것 유럽과 그리고 개발 협력형 부분은 여기 지금 미스 도가 와 계시지만 우리가 베트남 과기 장관 회의를 거의 매년 개최하고 있고 아까 부분도 브이키스트 사례를 말씀 주셨지만 그런 부분에서 응용 산업적인 부분에서 우리가 기금은 제가 어떻게 정부 차원이 아니기 때문에 말씀 못 드리지만 그런 기금이 지금 아시아 협력 기금도 있고요. 실제로 4월 달에 뱅콕에서 이제 에스캅에서 했던 우리가 컨퍼런스 한국과 베트남 정부가 에스캅 주관으로 해서 어떻게 하면 기후기술 협력을 아시아 국가에서 지도력을 발휘할 수 있을까라는 주제로 기후기술에 대한 이야기를 나눴었습니다. 그런 부분에서 실질적으로 우리가 연구소 출연연 GTC도 있고요. 그래서 그런 부분에서 플랫폼 안에서 기술 개발을 하고 협력을 하면 좋을 것 같습니다. 이상입니다.
Thank you, Mr. Song. We are really a little bit tight about our schedule. What about Dr. Huang as a next the discussion?
안녕하세요. 저는 국제기술센터의 환경화 연구이라고 합니다. 그래서 이런 자리를 만들어주신 기계하고 감사드리고 토론하기 전성 이사님, 교수님 함께 토론하게 돼서 영광이고요. 앞서 말씀해주신 의견과 그다음에 교수님께서 던져주신 질문들에 대한 제 의견을 먼저 좀 정리해서 말씀을 드리면은 저는 일단 오늘 그 토론의 주제가 궤도국과 관련돼 있으니까 궤도국과 관련된 주제들에 한해서는 과학기술 연구과 국제개발을 좀 분리시켰지만은 좀 더 국제개발 협력 쪽에서 차원에서 이루어질 수밖에 없다고 생각을 하고요. 그런 부분에 있어서 지금 출연연 중심의 지원들이 굉장히 활발하게 이루어지고 있는데 저는 개인적으로 좀 더 보완이 됐으면 하는 부분은 굉장히 한국에 궤도국 학생들이 많이 와 있는데 이런 인력들을 활용을 지금 충분히 잘하고 있나에 대해서 보시면 됩니다. 특히 한국에서 지금 공부하고 있는 궤도국 인력들을 충분히 활용을 하고 이런 대학과 지금 출연연과 협력이 많기 때문에 이런 기관들을 잘 활용을 해서 궤도국 협력 사업을 하면은 궤도국에 어느 기술 이전을 하고 그 현지에서 기술들이 잘 정착하고 확산되는 데 있어서 좀 더 원활하게 이루어질 수 있을 거라는 생각을 합니다. 그리고 한국의 역할은 지금 과학기술 물론 지금 출연연 중심의 과학기술 협력의 여러 가지 프로젝트들이 활발하게 진행되고 있지만 한국의 역할을 단순히 그런 협력 사업을 수행하는 것뿐만이 아니라 좀 더 확장을 해서 아시아 지역의 국제개발 협력을 확산할 수 있게 활발하게 촉진할 수 있는 여러 가지 정책 연구들도 활발하게 좀 진행이 되어야 된다고 개인적으로 생각합니다. 그리고 선진국과의 궤도국 협력에 대해서도 질문을 주셨는데 그 부분에 있어서는 저는 앞서 나왔던 의견들하고도 비슷하게 저도 현지 중심의 현지 참여가 활발하게 일어날 수 있는 기술들을 선택하는 것이 중요하다고 생각합니다. 지금 기후변화를 얘기를 할 때 기후변화의 문제들을 해결을 한다든지 아니면 경제개발 계획들을 달성하는 데 있어서의 분야들을 설정을 해서 기술적 활동을 많이 하고 있지만은 기후변화 그 협상에서 과학기술 협력, 기후변화에 대한 과학기술 협력을 얘기할 때 인큐베이팅하고 엑셀러레이팅을 굉장히 얘기를 많이 합니다. 결국에는 지역 중심으로 과학기술을 통해서 기후변화를 해결하는 것도 중요하지만 현지 역량을 좀 강화를 시켜서 이로 인해서 경제발전을 할 수 있는, 과학기술 발전을 할 수 있는 토대를 만드는 것도 중요하다고 보고 있다고 저는 개인적으로 이제 이해를 하고 있고요. 그래서 현지 지역민들의 기술 투명성을 높일 수 있는 세부적인 그런 기술을 선택을 하고 그 현지인들이 많이 참여를 해서 함께 기술 개발을 하고 리딩도 많이 나오지만 그런 접근을 하다 보면은 저희가 이제 기술 이전을 하면서 나오는 기술의 흡수라든지 아니면 역량 개발이라든지 기술의 장기적인 확산 등에도 많은 연결이 되지 않을까라는 생각을 하고 있습니다.
Thank you, Dr. Huang. Thank you. I think it's better to talk from the team first, and then effectively you can find out mistakes.
Thank you for inviting me today. Very glad that we get together and discuss about society to the carbon neutral society in very important time. So, yeah, when I received the topic of how to have international cooperation for the climate technology with Korea and other side of the world, it's very deep and huge topic. So let's make peace. So I think that as I'm a startup accelerator and investor, I think I want to discuss about the startups.
These days, startups are really it's a big, and there are many startups are booming all over the world, including Korea as well. And regarding the climate tech, a few years ago there was no climate tech startups in the world, but from last year there are really big booming about the climate tech startups from the US and Europe. And now Korea also have a lot of climate tech startups. So in this regard, I want to talk about the startups in the developing country. Making a startup, we need to make an ecosystem actually. So I think that the startup is kind of a seed. So when we put our seed into the ground, it grows and make a flower and make a fruit like 5 or 10 years later. So when we want to put our seed into the ground about the climate change and the carbon neutralized society, KIMM and the Korean research centers, they have very fundamental technology and basic science good technology. So I think we have a big power to help developing country in this regard. So one of my suggestions for today is that we set the incubator and the accelerator with the help of the KIMM and the other Korean research institute to the developing countries like Vietnam and Colombia, and to help not just the technology, but also we help them to set up the technology center, and we give our developed technology into them, and have a regular meeting with the startup in that country. That could be a very beginning stage of to solve this climate problem together with the startups. So when there is a technology and the support of the government, there must be a changes. It will not be a very quick change, but slowly we can change the environment of the startups and the industry regarding the climate tech. So so we can keep going on, and that can change the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kim. I hope the Kim Pangelos can support a lot about that too. Dr. Lee, can you give your talk?
안녕하십니까. 한국기계연구원의 이용규입니다. 제가 영어로 얘기를 하려고 했는데 아무래도 한글로 전달하는 게 의사 전달이 더 잘 될 것 같아서, 아까 앞서서 위원님께서 말씀하신 것처럼 저는 연구자다 보니까 실제 이런 기술적인 협력이 어떻게 이루어지는지에 대한 예를 하나 들어서 앞으로 협력의 방향성에 대해서 좀 제안을 좀 해보려고 합니다. 지금 저희 기계연구원과 인도네시아 정부와 범부처 사업으로 지원을 받아서 진행 중인 사업이 하나 있습니다. 인도네시아에 플랜트 팩토리를 만들고 그 안에서 작물을 재배해서 인도네시아 시장 내에 공급하는 과제인데요. 사실 그 인도네시아에서 딸기라는 작물이 상당히 인기가 있는 작물이라고 합니다. 근데 이 딸기는 인도네시아 기후 특성상 인도네시아에서 재배를 할 수가 없고 수입에 전량 의존하기 때문에 고가의 작물이 되는 거죠. 그러니까 수익성이 상당히 높은 작물인데 인도네시아 내에서도 상당히 인기가 높고요. 그래서 어떻게 하면 이런 고수익성 작물을 인도네시아 내에서 재배할까라는 고민을 하다가 저희들의 그 스마트팜 기술하고 연계돼서 진행되는 과제인데요. LED 조명으로 해서 밀집된 공간 내에서 딸기를 재배하고 그것을 수출하는 겁니다. 그러니까 이런 온실을 하기에는 또 인도네시아가 기후적으로 안 좋은 지역인데 거기는 에어 컨디션을 위해서 분산 발전 시스템을 쓰고 또 기계원이 가지고 있는 특화된 그 공조 기술과 결합돼서 실제 인도네시아 내에서 그런 작물을 재배할 수 있도록 하는 사업인데요. 사실 이러한 사업은 어쨌든 스마트팜 기술이 인도네시아 내로 보급되는 데도 큰 영향을 미칠 거고 또 인도네시아의 시장의 요구하고도 많습니다. 그렇다 보니 인도네시아 내에서도 기업과 대학이 부지를 제공하고 기술 이전을 받아서 한국의 그 연구자들이 함께 연구를 진행하고 있는데요. 제가 지금 이러한 형태의 협업이 앞으로 이 기후변화에 대응하는 국제협업의 좋은 샘플이라고 생각해요. 단순히 선진국이 개도국가한테 기술만을 이전하고 끝나는 것이 아니라 그 기술된 이전에 대한 필요성을 그 개도국이 느끼고 거기서 그 기술을 통해서 시장을 창출할 가능성이 있는 항목들을 중심으로 기술 이전이 진행된다고 하면 그런 기술 협력이 진행된다고 하면은 이런 국제 협력도 충분히 그 시장성을 갖고 장기간의 투자 자금도 유치할 수 있고 또 향후에는 그 지역 내에서 기후 변화에 대응하는 신시장을 창출할 수 있지 않을까라는 기대를 하게 됐는데요. 이러한 그 시장, 기술 그리고 재정 보조 이 세 개가 유기적으로 결합되고 서로의 니즈를 충족시키는 기술적인 아이템을 먼저 선정해서 기술 협력을 하는 것이 가장 초기 단계의 이상적인 모습이 아닐까라는 생각을 해봅니다. 이상입니다.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. Actually, I have never thought about how to combine these KIMMs, the technology with the Copia's ODA the businesses. But I think this is a really great idea. So I will also try to promote that kind of ideas for especially Colombia and Vietnam regarding Copia's business. So that would be a great idea. Thanks so much for the providing that the opportunity and ideas. The Huan and Doti, do you have any kind of the commentary notes regarding the discussion and others? Yes, Huan first.
Yeah, thank you very much. Really short. Well, take into account the intervention. If I get it correctly, I firstly believe that governance is really important. I believe so, as Mr. Song was saying, because governance is going to provide us like the rules for setting the playground, you know, and try how those projects are going to be taken into account. But at the same time, I think there is like a gap in the communication between the receivers and the providers, and that gap in details might be a pure knowledge thing. There's no understanding on how like a new technology can help a certain local community, because simply the community doesn't know the technology, it doesn't know like the benefits of that. So that's the gap. So for me, like being here, for instance, at the embassy, is actually hard for us to know what are the offers? Because at least I don't know it. Other embassies, they have people specialized in science and technology, and they actually know. But in our case, to identify, for instance, what the proposal or the example that Mr. Lee was putting on the table, sometimes it's difficult to acknowledge them and to imagine them on how they can be applied to Colombia, for instance. So thinking in a practical way to have a set of offers, not like an offer, but rather like a portfolio of how new technologies that are doing here in Korea can be applied to different scenarios in different worlds, and then how they can be tailor-made to the local scenarios in different countries can be very useful on how to foster it. This approach, I know, is against of like the traditional, like the forward thinking of cooperation, that it has to be made from the receiving country, the identification of the needs. But sometimes it's really hard for developing countries to know what they need. That's a huge task, and after that is even tougher to know how much it costs, or is going that those kind of things. I think that's my input to that, and yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Juan. We have to also consider what the receiver actually needs. So I think that would be another agenda we have to do to make a good collaborations between Korea and other countries, especially the Colombia. Thank you. Do you have any final comments? Yes.
I agree with Mr. Huang about the technology transfer, because Vietnamese enterprise need
machine technology to serve the manufacturer, and Vietnamese enterprise want to technology transfer to strengthen the technology level, and the second, Vietnam would like to receive the funding to apply the recent research in climate change. I think it's two opinion, and this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is the final. Do you have any last words to say? Otherwise, I'd like to say that this discussion today, even though we had a really, really small time, but it was wonderful. And thanks a lot for your the comments and the presentations. So I know that all the 4 topics are not only the retrospective about what we have done on our Earth, but also this is really respectful and also adventurous toward our positive and potential hope to make our work more livable, and also we wanted to pass our hope to our descendants. So I sincerely appreciate the 4 discussants, and also in addition to our presenters. I believe this second session could deliver the future love to our Earth and our citizens. So again, reaching carbon neutral society is very, very difficult, but this is the only way and must do the thing we have to do. We may not know well about the climate change, but from now on, let's change ourselves, and let's immediately move our step toward decarbonization, and let's promise what we will do and what we should do for our future. Thank you again for all your interest and participants. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.